Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ReQuest. It's me, Captain Logan, and joining me, as always, is my fantastic co-host, Austin, the Day Ghost. And it is a requested vault once again. We've been doing a lot of comics lately. Which, what are you drinking tonight, Austin?
Strawberry and cream Dr. Pepper.
Wow, that sounds great. If I still drink soda.
It's very sweet.
Austin is going to need that to fuel himself for this review. We've got quite a gauntlet to run tonight. I was just going to say it's been a lot of fun reviewing as many comics as we have lately. We've been bringing the vault back. Austin and I have been picking our own things. We did not choose this. I'll just get that up front. It is a request. Tonight we're going to tackle the first volume, which is really the first half of Just Imagine Stan Lee creating the DC Universe. I think whenever you say this title, you have to put your hands in the air like this. Just imagine Stan Lee creating the DC, yeah, exactly, the DC Universe. Stan Lee did 12 of these. They're all one-shots that are 48 pages long. I say one-shots because I don't think they're numbered. I think each of them was a separate title, but there is kind of an order for them, and they are all in the same continuity, and there's kind of a looming building threat in the background, and then after the first 5 that introduced the main 5 members of the Justice League, we are uniting the 5, Austin. Then when you get to the end of this first volume, you get the Justice League, and then again there is another volume. We've not looked at that yet. I don't know if we'll ever read that or review that, but there are things I'm slightly curious about with that. I think I'm already showing my hand a little bit with this. There are some things I'm slightly curious to look at with that, but I almost want to just kind of jump around and see.
Do they do other characters for that, or is it just more with these characters?
No, they did. So I will pull this up real quick to get the I know they did Sandman, and somebody in the comments or before we started the live comments, welcome folks watching live, thanks for being here, thanks for watching after the fact as well. Somebody said that was the best of these, he thought, but the ones in the second volume are Secret Files and Origins,
okay,
which I guess is supposed to be like setting us up for Crisis even more than the Justice League issue does, and it's supposed to be like the national exposer interviewing the various Justice League members, and then he does a Robin, and then he does a Shazam, and an Aquaman, and a Catwoman, and then Sandman is after that, and then he does his Crisis.
Wow, why does Catwoman get her own? That's weird.
Yeah, I mean, I especially think it's odd, and again, I'm kind of putting my feelings on full display when I say this, that we end up with 3 Batman characters out of the 12 issues, and in a lot of ways, I felt like Batman was the character Stan Lee was least interested in out of this initial volume, which is odd, and we'll talk about it. We'll see if Austin feels the same way I do about that particular story, that particular issue. But I don't know, like it. There was a lot more energy, I felt like, kind of increasingly as it went along, but with some of the other characters, and he seemed just a little bit more excited to reinvent them, as it were. And that seemed like the most kind of, cookie cutter, cut and paste derivative of those stories. There's a lot of derivative stuff throughout this.
Well, it's funny for me. I would say it's a roller coaster. Like you're slowly building up, and then that Flash one is the worst one, and it like completely dives off.
Oh, we'll have to talk about that. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That was not my experience with it, but we'll see if you sway me when we get there.
Yeah.
Because I didn't mind that one so much, but for my money, like I said, I think they kind of get better as they go along. I don't think the Flash one is my favorite, but I enjoyed it more than some of the others. And it's not even so much sometimes the exact like take on the characters and even the story that it's telling, so much as just the kind of tone of it, the just general feel, and whether Stan Lee felt like he wanted to be there in the writing, and that was one I felt like he was having a little bit more fun with than some of the others.
Yeah, I would say for me, just to get it like up front.
Yeah, sure.
It's
So we'll talk
Flash.
about what exactly this is, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's Flash, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, Superman, and then the team up thing is just kind of on the side. That's just they come together. That's all there is.
Yeah. Well, so we'll have a little bit of disagreement here and there, but like, overall, this was a bit of a slog for me. Like, I did not have a great time reading this, and it's a bummer because, of course, it's at face value a fun idea. At least the initial general idea of Stan Lee going to DC and playing in that sandbox, in that toy box. Right up front, I want to say I just wish that's what it was. And I get the idea of this is like Stan Lee reinvents the whole thing. He kind of goes back and reinvents the wheel. You've got the names of these characters and maybe the very general skeleton of the premise, but he's going to make his own story out of it as if they were Marvel characters, or as if he made a DC universe instead of a Marvel universe. And so I understand what that initial idea is. I don't really know what the rules are. I wish that there was a more specific set of criteria that he was working with this, because it feels like there's none. It feels like he can do anything he wants to, and he's very inconsistent about how he approaches each of the characters, and I found that really distracting. Like, I didn't want to I wanted Stan Lee to either, and I feel weird being overly critical of this, after the man's been not with us for a few years, but I gotta call it like I'm seeing it. Like, I wish either there was nothing besides the initial name and concept to remind me of anything in canon, any original things with these characters, or that he was just telling stories about those characters. I think it would have been a lot more interesting if this was, what would the first issue or two, or a one-shot of a Stan Lee run for Batman, a Stan Lee run for Superman. Give me that. This feels like a waste of time compared to what that might have been.
For me, it's the comic book equivalent of the Expendables. It happened way too late, and it's not his best work.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like even it being well past his writing prime, I mean, this is a guy that did not continue, in my personal opinion, to improve or expand his skills as a writer. At some point, he would occasionally come back for things, but at some point, he basically hangs up his writer's hat and becomes a businessman. And this reads very much to me like a guy who's been trying to get his characters made for Hollywood movies for the last 20 years, trying to write somebody else's characters. That's exactly what it is, and that's how it reads.
So I will agree and disagree. Like, in terms of dialogue, yes. The big thing this is missing is like Stanley's over-the-top captioning. That's something that he's dropped.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely fair. I mean, there's a little bit of it here and there, but he doesn't do a ton.
No, and most of it I think is fine. Like, it's not that classic Stanley, like, I'm explaining every single panel to you.
Well, and I also don't know how much that would have improved it, really. I mean...
No, I think that's a way in which he is better,
but...
Oh,
I see what you're saying. I thought you meant you needed that stuff to come back.
No, I'm just saying, I think that, like, yes and no in terms of, like, him, like, getting with the times in terms of what comics were like then, because that is something that he dropped. But then, obviously, his dialogue is very... Stanley, but not
well, and his plotting as well. Like he's and I'm thinking less form and more just storytelling. But yeah, you're absolutely right. He's not coming in and marking up the books as much as he usually would. I also, though, am suspicious of how Marvel method this was made, because I think you might have seen more of that if he had done this more the way he was working with those artists in the early 60s. I think some of it is just the way they went about this, Austin. I don't know that that's
true too.
An improvement or an evolution so much as just because when you look at the like big hardcovers for these, I was reading this in digital, but I was looking at the like big kind of deluxe set they put out for the first volume. There is a letter from each of the artists as an afterword after each of these, and a couple of them, none of them come right out and talk very much about the process with this, but a couple of them kind of show their hand a little bit, suggesting that Stan Lee had first draft scripts that they then kind of changed and doctored after that. And if that's the case, well, that's not at all how he worked. He would write it. He would write an
It's the
outline.
exact opposite.
Yeah, sometimes even just like a few bullet points on a cocktail napkin, and then an artist would do a full-blown story without knowing what the dialogue was going to be, and then Stan Lee would come in later, write all the dialogue in, and punch it up. And even when artists would have, like Jack Kirby, would have liked to have filled in the balloons, he wouldn't let them, and the writing was his job, and he did all of that. And I think if this had been done that way, you would have seen more of what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Because when captions are thrown in, like occasionally he'll make a joke like in narration boxes where he'll be like, I was going to put a dialogue or a sound effect word here, but I couldn't think of one that was good enough, so I just didn't do it. You know, that kind of thing. Those things all felt real forced because they were so few and far between that it was like, he knows he's supposed to do that because he's Stan Lee, but we're not working in the Marvel method, so they just don't come up. Very often.
Every page, Stan Lee to be like, sorry, this is taking so long, readers. We're going to get to the action soon.
Chewbacca's Lover mentions that I liked the Silver Surfer Mobius book. I'm not saying that he never did any good work after he left there, although I think there's a real big difference between Stan Lee in the late 80s and Stan Lee by 2001.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and
what I mean by that is, sorry, I know he had been more of the businessman for a while by then, but we're not talking about decades. We're talking a few years at that point. This is, you know, this is Stan Lee coming into his 80s.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
What is he, like late 70s at this point? My math brain's not working.
Somewhere around there.
This is 01. He was, how old was Stan Lee when he died? Like 96?
I wanted to say like 94.
94? Yeah, so this would have been not even, 20 years before he died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Like just short of 20.
So, Austin, the big question I got to ask you with this is, the title is Just Imagine Stan Lee creating the DC Universe. Is this at all what you imagined?
No. Instead of Just Imagine, it's what if Stan Lee took every DC character and added a pinch of Spider-Man and maybe a pinch of another Marvel character?
Yeah.
But every single one of them has Spider-Man in there somewhere.
Yeah. That's absolutely right.
And then there's kind of the first issue of Avengers with the whole Rick Jones calling the Avengers, or calling the Fantastic Four, but it goes out to the Avengers characters and they all unite. Like, we do that plot point. Like, there's some things like that he's taking from other books. Like, obviously Wonder Woman's got some Thor. Trying to think of what else. I don't know.
Well, and some of the characters in books that certain bits of this were reminding me of, I couldn't decide if it was on Stan Lee's end or the art as much, because there are places where I feel like the artists, and we'll talk about who's involved with this, because for the most part it's a, who's who, and it was interesting to see Stan Lee paired with some of these artists. I mean, don't get me wrong, like, this is an interesting curiosity. I just wish I could have read it like more broken up. This is
I
like,
wish, like,
one sit down read.
Something else.
Yeah, well, no, me too. But it's still an interesting curiosity.
Yeah.
Just that it happened. But it's not. It wasn't a ton of fun to read, I have to say. But there were places where I felt like art was trying to throw back to certain specific Marvel books in the earliest days. And I think one of the reasons that I enjoyed the Green Lantern issue maybe more than you did, Austin, was because of how much, like, Fantastic Four and Silver Surfer was just in that art.
Mhm.
Like I liked what that
Yeah.
book looked like a lot.
No, I liked how
That
that
monster
looked.
fight in particular is really cool, and that was one of the few places where I felt like I was really thrown back into '60s Marvel, which I thought was part of this whole thing is very muddled to me in its premise and its idea and what it's after. But I felt like that was sort of one of the mission statements, and that was a place where I actually really had that.
Hmm. Yeah, exactly. Well, and I think for me with Green Lantern is it's Indiana Jones, which I already like, and then it takes away everything I like about it, and then he kind of just turns into Captain Atom, who's not a character that I'm especially interested in, and and then the story just kind of fizzles out, I think, with that one.
That's fair. Some of it too, and I don't mean to just get defensive
Mhm.
about what I liked versus you,
No,
but
because that's my second favorite. So like, keep
oh,
in
okay.
mind, like I put Superman over it because of that, but like I still think that's the second best.
But that also tells me how much you did not care for this. When you say my second favorite of these six is the one that takes one of my favorite characters and takes out all the fun, I go, okay, Austin really enjoyed this book. Because because obviously the Indiana Jones in it is clear, at least from the initial premise. Like it's an archaeologist slash teacher
Mhm.
that goes off in search of a holy grail of sorts, and the only difference is he ends up becoming a superhero over it. I don't think I would have liked that issue as much if I'd read it in a vacuum. In fact, I know for sure I wouldn't have. A
Mhm.
lot of it was that it was interrupting boring because I
Yeah.
was really bored, and then I got to that, and I felt like the writing got tighter. It wasn't as wordy. There was more energy, more fun in it, and we finally had a hero who was more flat out altruistic and more like old school heroic, which I was really kind of missing with this. I felt like before that, and Superman, I feel like, and we haven't set these up for people that haven't read it yet, so I don't mean to get too far ahead of myself. But Austin, I felt like Superman has the real potential to become something closer to like classic Superman. But he starts in a real kind of self-serving place, and we just get an origin. We don't get to see that happen with him. So I was a little frustrated with that. With Green Lantern, I felt like I got more of the whole package. I feel like I got an
Yeah.
origin and a superhero story. He becomes a superhero a little bit earlier. I could see the movie in it, to put it from Stan Lee's terms, because one of the things I found really distracting about this is just his constant obsession with his characters getting movies. It comes up over and over again in this. You keep having Flash going, "Wouldn't this make a great movie?" And we're talking about movie rights, and like it keeps coming up. Like I can't decide if it's Stan Lee being self-deprecating and self-aware or having no self-awareness whatsoever.
I mean, this 2001 Spider-Man's being made. Like the that stuff's on the horizon.
Well, and I don't know if you know about this, but he did and we've talked about this interview a couple times before, but I just don't know if you've seen all of it or if you remember this part of it. But he did an interview with Kevin Smith that was put out on a disc that you could buy. I own it, and it was. I can't remember what that's called, but it's like Kevin Smith sits down with Stan Lee, and it was like there were two of them. They were on the same disc, and one was all about Spider-Man, and the other one was like mutants, Marvels, and something. I forget what the title was, but anyway,
Yeah, I
uh,
think I remember that.
that comes out in '02, just after Spider-Man comes out, and this comes up because it had just been published, and he acts like he's being tongue in cheek the way he's saying it, but I feel like there's this underlying wish with it where Stan Lee is just a little bit kind of self-serving and wants to see everything he's ever made become a movie because movies legitimize you, and and also that's where the money is, right?
Well, I mean, I've
Um,
always said Stan Lee did a lot of good for the comic book industry out of sheer embarrassment for working in the
that
comic book
that's
industry. Like,
exactly right. Yeah.
that is a fact.
And when I said that, I'm not calling Stan Lee money grubbing. I'm saying he wanted to look respectable. I
Yeah,
he
that's how he spent his life. Like, that that is a fair assessment of the man. Like,
Hmm.
he was embarrassed at the time to tell people he worked in comics, and that's why he uses a fake name. And then he did a lot of good for comics because of that. But
Yeah, and there are because we go to sound bites a lot with Stan Lee in interviews where he's really talking up the comic business and being the salesman, and we forget about interviews and just times he was recorded where he would talk pretty candidly about not getting why even anybody likes or reads comics. Like Stan Lee was he could be passionate about his ideas, and in a way he was passionate about the medium because he worked in it and he was a pioneer with it and all of that. But in my estimation, it was one of those things where he went, and again, I'm not calling him money grubbing, but he went where the money was. He stayed in comics because it paid his bills, and he didn't really understand comic fans. He was like,
mm,
if you know, I would not read these if I was not working in this. And he all but
yeah,
said that.
I mean, he was working in comics until he could kind of break away and write like novels, but then he broke
Robert
big
Wilde just mentioned
comics.
that in the
Oh,
comments.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, that's absolutely right. No,
yeah, exactly.
he wanted to be he wanted to be seen as a great author or a great movie producer, or just something that was considered more widely as a legitimate pursuit.
And I mean, he was successful. Like,
Ultimately, yes. It just happened a lot later in life than he was hoping it would.
yeah,
Late
exactly.
enough where I think it was a little bit harder for him to enjoy it,
hmm Yeah, for sure.
which is a little sad. But anyway, we'll
Yeah.
get off the history lesson and try to get more into this
Should we
actual
knock out the super chats first, or do you
book
want to jump?
that we read. Yeah, let's do that. Just real quick. I was gonna say
Mhm.
just to kind of set the stage for this. I so with the whole like just imagine title, in some ways this is kind of exactly what I would have expected coming into this, and like I think I read one of these at one point. Somebody the other day mentioned that Vince and I did a review of the Superman one. I don't even remember doing that, but I remember popping one or two of these open here and there and going, this just looks really generic. And like I said, I wish that he'd either just written a story about each of these characters that was, in continuity, out of continuity, whatever, but just the stuff you're more familiar with, or at least played with more of the toys in the sandbox. Like, I find it really distracting and quite frankly, kind of irritating that some of these stories use no names or characters at all from the original material, and then some of them straight up start doing that, and I don't know where to
Yeah, because it's really just Superman and Wonder Woman, I think, where it's like we bring in a Steve Trevor and a Lois Lane, but everything else doesn't do that.
yeah, but we also let Superman be called Clark Kent,
Oh, yeah.
but then our Batman has Wayne in his name, but he's not Bruce Wayne. And this isn't me being a purist going Stan Lee need to do everything like the original comics. I get what the idea is here. I'm not sure he gets what the idea is here.
But
Like I don't know where I stand with it sometimes. Where I have to kind of keep readjusting. It's like, am I supposed to think about the material that it's adapting, sort of, that it's based on, or am I supposed to throw all of that out? Because occasionally, like you said, he'll bring up somebody like Steve Trevor, and I'm supposed to go, that's a Wonder Woman character. We're in Wonder Woman, and I'm thinking about all of that stuff. Like what are the rules? Why did we have
when we bring in a Diana
why did
Prince
we
in
have a
Wonder
Diana
Woman
Prince
2,
who's
which is
not
weird.
Wonder Woman?
That part was really
Anyway,
weird.
we're getting ahead of ourselves, but it's very
Uh,
strange. And
but
then
the Clark Kent one I will give him because it leads to a joke that's probably not intentional, but it made me smile, which is you go back to Spider-Man issue 3, where Doc Ock calls him Superman, and he gets the name
oh
Clark Kent, where it's like Peter and Clark, and then it's the corner of Parker and Kent, and
yeah,
he's like, "I'll pick my name off of these two things," and he gets Clark Kent. I was like, "That's kind of funny. That's probably not intentional, but."
okay. See, I didn't realize that was maybe a connection to anything. I kind of rolled my eyes at that. I didn't.
No, because it's. I think the way the joke it was intended is very roll your eyes worthy. But it made me smile because I was like, oh, like that's a funny reference to a mistake in Stanley's comics that he probably doesn't even remember.
Okay. I mean yeah, that's fun if it's in like
It
whether or
becomes
not it's intentional,
unintentionally
but
funny.
but like I didn't remember that or know about that. So all I'm doing is going, okay, I'm reading what is supposed to be Superman, and you have to keep reminding me about Spider-Man after you just made Batman a wrestler. Like, stop it.
Well, because
Anyway,
every single one of them is Spider-Man in to some
right.
degree.
And then when you get to Justice League, he finally gives us more characters that aren't whose names are not in the title, that like we said earlier with the Doom Patrol, that are character names from DC that he then reinvents, and I go, okay, well, if you're gonna do that, why can't you also have your own Lex Luthor, or why can't Superman Zod just be called Zod? Like, he's clearly Zod, just make him Zod.
Mm-hmm.
You know, just have your Superman be Jor-El in the first place. Like, I don't get that. And then is the planet supposed to be called Krypton? Because I don't think it's ever named, but then in wikis and other material I found online, it keeps being referred to as Krypton.
I think
So,
it just says a place that you couldn't pronounce even if we told you, or
no,
something like that.
no, that was just for the name of the galaxy it's in.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Anyway, we got another super chat. Let's go ahead and read these down, and then we'll figure out how exactly we want to approach this, Austin, if we want to go kind of linear with it or talk about it a little bit more broadly. And I'll start showing art, too. SS Jerry, $5 super chat. Thanks for these streams, Cap. Well, you should thank Austin, too. He shows up for a lot of these. Been stuck at home recovering from a broken arm. Oh, sorry to hear that, man.
Yeah, it sucks, man. I hope you get better.
For my money, the Robin one is the best issue. And again, somebody else said Sandman, and then Amalgamation put in a $2 super chat. And thanks for the extra support. He requested this tonight. Thanks for being here. And sorry for the late posting with this, by the way, or late stream, or however you want to look at it. He says the Catwoman one was probably the most enjoyable. So
apparently all the volume 2
all the good stuff is in the second volume, and we have to do this one. So does that make you slightly more curious to look at the rest of this? It only makes me curious to see what the designs are and the basic premises. Like, I wonder what
artists they got.
Yeah, because I wonder what he does with Robin solo.
I just assumed that was a sequel to Batman, but I guess we probably shouldn't take that as a...
Is his Catwoman even connected to Batman? Like, who knows? Yeah. We can't assume that. Look,
that is true.
Look, all you can do is imagine how he's creating these things, Austin. You just have to imagine it. Dan Schneider put in two super chats. Thank you, sir. $5. He says, while Stan Lee was embarrassed about comics, he was a big fan of science fiction and pulp novels. That's true. The movie he wanted to write had genre and fantasy elements. And yeah, that's true. He wasn't. I'm sorry. I said he put in 2 super chats, but one of them is Bob the Hunnell. So thanks, man. But yeah, he didn't shy away from genre, certainly.
Well, I mean, of the Marvel things, you can tell the 2 things he cares the most about are Fantastic Four, which is that aspect, and then Spider-Man, because it's the most personal.
Yeah,
to him.
Well, and I think Silver Surfer might be his favorite character.
Yeah, but I just kind of lump him with Fantastic Four.
No, I know. I'm just adding on to that point.
Yeah.
By saying like his favorite character is a big sci-fi concept. Bob the Hun $5 super chat. Sounds like what this needed was Steve Ditko and Jack Kirby to draw and plot them. Austin said the very same thing to me earlier off camera. He says with Stan Lee writing the dialogue after the fact, or even just the artists he has. I mean, they're all competent artists. Like, it would be cool. I read a degree of frustration in a couple of those letters that they maybe didn't work that way.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the big thing that I mentioned to you off camera with Kirby was the Wonder Woman one where we do the Thor like mythology thing. I think Lee does like a very half-assed one that's... I don't think he kind of keeps everything together, while the mythology aspect from Thor is very clearly what Kirby was into. So like...
Yeah.
So like Lee's doing it, but that was more Kirby's thing, like, clearly.
So real quick, here's the artist rundown. We've got Joe Kubert on Batman. We've got Jim Lee on Wonder Woman. What did you think of that choice? That was kind of a jarring contrast, right?
Yes, that I think is the weakest art of the book. I'm very hit or miss on Jim Lee. I don't know if you have this, where it's like you have a Jim Lee that is sometimes too 90s-y for me, and then other times I think he looks really great later on. But then I also don't think he works great on certain characters. Like I'm not a big fan of him on Batman stuff.
Yeah, my issue with Jim Lee, and I'm not the biggest fan. I tend to like Jim Lee covers better than interiors.
Sure.
It just depends on what we're looking at. Like I recently bought a Jim Lee cover for the newly released Batman Spawn book because I just adored it, and I read 2 pages of that and put it down. I'll probably never read that. Like it's terrible. Um, but for me, the thing with Jim Lee is his art is best when it's real polished. Like he's got to
Mhm.
do all the detail. He's got to finish all the lines. And he's a guy who's very prolific, has a lot of work obviously cuz he's so popular and he's very fast, but you can tell when he's phoning stuff in, I think whether it's because he's not real into the book, or I suspect just because he's too busy. And there are certain things that he kind of rushes through a little bit, and I think some artists get away with that. If you're Jim Lee, I just don't think you do. I think every panel's got to be spick and span polished, and that's part of what's kind of that's one of the drawbacks I think for having really detailed art. And he's pencily sketchy, but he's very detailed, and also just for the standards being so high for your work because you're so popular. And I think that's one of the reasons that McFarlane maybe lost interest in drawing monthly books, is that just the pressure was on for everything to be perfect all the time, and
Mhm.
he can't phone his stuff in either.
Mhm. Yeah, because I find when Lee does a Jim Lee, not Stan Lee, when Jim Lee starts to go that route, it starts to get too Liefeld-y for me, where like I just see too much of that era of comics in it.
Yeah, that's fair.
And but as Connor as Connor has always said, Jim Lee will take on project after project after project to do anything other than finish All-Star Batman and Robin.
I don't know if the scripts were ever done.
Who knows?
I don't think we'll ever know that.
But it makes me sad.
And then you got Buscema. What was the next? Because these aren't labeled, but I guess the next one was Superman. So you have
Yes, Buscema and
Buscema and
Superman.
Superman, and that art was all right. And
Yeah.
then you've got Gibbons on Green Lantern, which again I think was probably my favorite art in the whole piece.
The only thing I have with that is I found the Green Lantern design kind of distracting because I was like, oh, it's just Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah,
But I'm
I
sure that was intentional.
I had exactly that too. We'll talk about that whole thing here in a little bit. And then Kevin McGuire, who's a name I didn't immediately recognize, but I went and looked at him, and he did a lot of like 80s JLA, and
Mhm.
so he's apparently a classic major artist that nobody talks about.
Mhm.
But he did Flash,
And then Jerry
and
Ordway on JLA.
yeah,
Yeah. Because that was the big one that I was like, oh, when's Jerry Ordway going to show up? Oh, of course, he was JLA.
yeah, which is funny because a lot of the other artists were people who hadn't really worked on the characters very much that they were doing, I either ever or very much. And then you're like, oh, and then you got Ordway doing Justice League. Okay, like that's not real far off the beaten path.
Well, it just seemed like he was kind of like maybe the biggest artist, maybe. It was kind of what I was thinking. Like, so we ended with him, but
Out of this slate,
maybe not
I
at this point
guess
with Jim
maybe.
Lee. Maybe not at this point with Jim Lee,
Yeah. I would say
but
most
like,
of these guys are pretty on par as far as just
yeah.
recognizability and ability. I'm curious to see what the other 6 are, and I kind of don't want to look at it until I look at that book. I know that volume. I know you have no interest, and
I'll
like I
just
said, I don't know if I'll
Wikipedia it.
actually read it. I just want to flip through it and see who it is.
Yeah, I'll just Google who it was.
But I agree with what Bob the Hun said about needing a Ditko or a Jack Kirby. But again, any
Yeah,
of these guys could have done that job, and I just wish they'd done it
yeah.
more that way.
Well, the next comic we're doing is a Stanley Ditko thing, and we will see
Oh, that's
why
true.
they work.
Well, and I guess yeah, and that's gonna be a couple 3 weeks from now, guys, because I'm gonna have to take a little bit of
Yeah.
time off. I'm about to take trips, and I've got a real busy week next week and stuff. So I'm gonna be on a mini hiatus, just so folks know. I'll announce that again, proper later. But we'll have a couple more videos this weekend, so don't worry, we'll have stuff to tide you over. But anyway, and then Tom put in a $2 super chat and says, really enjoying this review. Thanks, man. But yeah, I'm not sure exactly how involved with the plotting any of these artists were. It's kind of hard to say.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure either. Um, I'm sure the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, which is the case with like most Stanley things post like the mid 90s.
Okay, so what do you think, Austin? Do you want to go kind of book by book, or do you want to just keep talking about this kind of more broadly and
I'm
like
game with
make
whichever you
connections
want to
with
do.
it? And because I don't want to get too in the weeds with it. We're already half an hour in,
Mhm.
and some of this stuff is not sticking with me the best, but I'll do my best. Um,
Yeah, I'm game with whichever you want to do. If you want to do it more vague, talking about all the books at once, or if you want to go book by book, whichever.
one of the issues, I'll say this just real quick, and yeah, maybe we'll just like real gently kind of lickety split go through each of these. We'll try not to get in the weeds with it too much. The thing is, none of these is super complex or anything. They shouldn't take a real long time to talk about,
Hmm.
but most of them, I would say, are much longer than they need to be, particularly the Batman issue. Like, that feels like a 20-page origin stretched to 48 pages.
Hmm. Yeah, and some of them you can really tell that he's stretching for time, and others I think feel more natural.
Yeah, I think Green Lantern feels pretty natural. I think one of the things I liked about Flash was that more than you was just that I wasn't like looking at my watch as much reading that one.
Interesting. I think that one's stalling for time really
Oh
hard.
wow, that's
Um,
funny.
no, I think the ones that aren't for me are Superman and Green Lantern. If anything, I think Green Lantern could have been a little bit longer because, like I said, I think it kind of fizzles out a little bit where it goes, let's just stop the villain because we got to wrap this up.
I Yeah, one of the things I started saying this a second ago, and I got sidetracked. One of the things that frustrated me about this a little bit was just the order that the books were released in, and that we read them in, where I would notice too many similarities sometimes, like back to back with choices in character origins or things with their powers, like. I think it's a little. I don't want to say lazy necessarily. Like, and maybe one of the more broad things we should talk about is just Stan Lee's more arguably Marvel-esque approach to the DC universe. It feels like one of the big kind of mandates he maybe had for himself was, uh, well, it's my style. It's more Marvelish, so these characters can't be as iconic and overpowered as they're typically played as. So he's gotta make a real big deal out of weaknesses. And if I'm gonna have both Flash and Green Lantern have the exact same weakness, where if they use their powers too much, they just get winded and they have to stop and take a nap, at the very least, and there's no difference between either of them. They're exactly the same. She runs for a while and then she gets real tired and has to stop. And Green Lantern has the same thing. He even talks about it the same way, where he's like, you need a recharge. And like, there's not a physical Green Lantern power battery, but they're both talked about as needing a recharge. Like, at the very least, I don't put those issues back to back.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and then you have Superman, whose power set is bizarre. I don't know if you had this, but like Superman lands on Earth and he's like, "Oh, the gravitational field is different, therefore I can fly. I'm super strong. I can see like far into the distance."
I
And I
will
was like,
say that that
"What does
felt
that have to
like
do with anything?"
that felt like kind of a Marvel approach.
And the main thing I had going into this is I was like, okay, I've seen all of Stanley's rants about Superman's flying, so they're
Yeah.
gonna have an answer for that, and then they don't.
No, the answer is just he's kind of weightless. I mean, the one thing, and that was a total cop out when it came to extra powers.
Mhm.
So it's like his explanation for he doesn't have X-ray vision or anything. It's just telescopic. His explanation for telescopic vision is, and he has telescopic vision. Like I didn't really understand what that had to do with gravity.
It's just because the gravity is different. He can see farther.
I think he says that. Yeah.
It's like almost word for word.
Okay, but would you agree with me? That's at least a better and more plausible explanation, just relatively, than the hummingbird thing.
Okay.
If you've not read this, we have a female Flash, and she gets her powers because her father injects her with a serum
No, it's more insane than that.
that is hummingbird blood, and he's supposed to give her just a little bit to cure this disease she has, but he trips and he accidentally gives her way too much of it. Now, it's tragic because I think the reason he trips is he gets murdered in that very moment.
It is, yeah. It's like he's putting it in, and then he gets shot 8 times in the back. I will disagree with you. The Flash's origin is brilliant. It's hysterical, and the Flash's original origin is one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. Where he's like holding chemicals, and he gets zapped by lightning, and they all spill on him, and then now he can run fast.
Yeah.
It's like Stanley went, that origin's stupid. I'm gonna give the Flash the stupidest origin I can think of. And it's not just the hummingbird thing, because they're in a boat and she goes, oh, look, the water is green and there's a bunch of dead fish in the water. And then she falls in the water and she comes out and she's green. And then the green
and then it just wears off.
And then it like combines with the hummingbird DNA.
Did you have what I did where I kind of expected it to be, I thought that was going to maybe be a Superman connection? Where
I thought it was a Green Lantern connection, which would maybe explain.
Could have been either. I thought it was going to be
weakness.
Kryptonite because we have a setup for Kryptonite. We never do anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Not offhand, no.
Well, we're told that that their Krypton. I'm just rushing forward because we're talking about Flash. Their Krypton has, if that's indeed its name, has this green substance that they use to power their ships. And Stanley makes a big deal a couple times out of it being the color green. We never do anything with it. I expected it to come back later in the issue to be his weakness, and it was never mentioned again. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so then I thought maybe the water was filled with kryptonite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I assumed it was a Green Lantern thing, which would explain why they have the same weakness, but they never really talk about it
with that. Yeah. Well, and then what's hilarious about we're just jumping all over the way. What's hilarious about the hummingbird thing is it's already a really silly, ultra cheesy explanation. I mean, it's worse than you throw a hammer and you fly, right?
But it's not even like a cheetah or something.
No, he says hummingbird wings are the fastest thing on the planet. The fastest thing is the flapping of hummingbird wings, and then he gives her time travel without Speed Force because of hummingbird. No, I loved the Flash issue. It cracks me the hell up.
I had to put the time travel part down for a second because I was like, that's not how that works. Where it's like I ran so at the fast and the speed of light, so I saw myself because the light hadn't moved yet, but you're not going back in time. That's just you're seeing the light that hasn't moved. Like,
did you notice? Stanley was a scientist. I don't know if you know that.
That might be like an original Flash thing, though, because I know the Speed Force doesn't come until Wade. So, like, maybe that's the explanation for the Flash time travel.
Yeah, because it did exist before that. You had the Flash of 2 Earths, and so you already had like interdimensional stuff with Flash, and.
Mm-hmm. So, like, that might just be the original Flash's thing, and I don't know, but that was insane.
Did you notice also the corner that he painted himself in, where her villain, By the way, all the villains in this are real kind of like stock and forgettable and one note, and they're all kind of the same, or at least a lot of them are kind of the same. And that's why I kind of wanted him to just do his versions of
They're villains.
their villains. Yeah, because the ones he came up with were kind of just throwaway and nothing, a lot
Well,
of
the
them.
villain of the Flash book is like my thing with the Flash book, because this goes in with the villain, is that that feels like him writing like the Catwoman movie, and like that is the villain of that, where it's like, we're doing the female superhero
So
movie.
she's got to have a female villain, and you
Uh,
can do that if she's cool, but she's not.
And
Well, it's also that movie because she wants to be ageless.
yeah, and I was like, okay,
And
we're gonna do like the Indiana Jones thing, where like she's gonna like age up and then like become the Crypt Keeper at the end, right?
yeah,
Like in Last Crusade. And then it's not even through anything with the Flash. Like she just does it.
no,
It's
she's
like
just
it's
stupid enough to not
anticlimactic.
listen to her henchmen, who she keeps murdering just because she doesn't care about people, and once she's totally independent, she can just get rid of all of her henchmen. And she's like, and one of them is trying to explain a drawback to the time travel technology she has, and she goes, don't tell me about weaknesses. I don't want to hear about that. And then it turns out, of course, that if she time travels too much, she ages up real fast and dies. Also, Stan Lee is kind of obsessed with that through this. Like, it never happens for the same reason. We have like 3 or 4 different characters that age rapidly. It keeps happening for some reason.
And we have at least 2 villains who part of their villain plot is forcing a woman to marry them.
There's a lot of that too. This is one of the only villains that doesn't have that, just because she's already a woman.
Mhm.
But she doesn't do it the other way, where it's like, oh, this man better marry me.
It could have gone that way, because there is the part where she's like, "You are a man, I am a woman. Talk to me like you are a man and I am a woman." But then she like pretends to kill him, but he doesn't die.
But I was going to
Then he
mention
comes back
Stan Lee kind of
Oh,
Lee paints himself in a corner by the end, because he goes, "Oh yeah, I just remembered that I made up a time travel that if you keep using it, you age fast. So why doesn't my time traveling heroine age fast? Something. Her chemical makeup is different because of the thing she got hit with at the beginning, and so she's fine." And there's just a throwaway line about it. It's really funny.
eh. These are the thoughts given.
Throughout these, you have this villain in the background who's got his own church, who is, and I'm going to assume that this is not intentional. I'm going to assume this is Stan Lee not actually knowing very much about DC and accidentally landing really close to the name of a DC villain, but not actually doing that villain. Because if it's the other way, it's mind blowing that he would do that. We have a villain here named Dominic Dark with 2 R's. So he's Damien Dark, but he's Dominant Dark.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I was like, that's weird.
I was like, there's no way he knows about Damien Dark, right?
No. Well, and then he ends up being the father of Adam Strange, who pops in.
Which
He's
was
the Rick
strange.
Jones.
Now,
But evil.
to be fair, Damien Dark is a character I only know about because of the Arrowverse shows, and I don't know how prominent he ever was in comics. I don't know what you had to be reading to get to him much. Like, I'm assuming that's either a Green Arrow or a Flash character. Like, I don't actually know. But
We are talking about the Stan Lee who in the 90s, or I guess late 80s, was shown the artwork for Pride of the X-Men and was like, "I only recognize Cyclops."
yeah. No, and again, it's not like he regularly read comics or anything. So
Yeah.
I'm not giving him crap for not knowing who Damien Dark is. Of course, like, I'm into this stuff, and I didn't know who that was for the longest time. But I think it's really odd that he landed almost on that exact name.
Mhm. That is strange.
And
Adam Strange.
I think he handles the dark thing a little kind of sloppily and just thrown in there. Like, when we're first introduced to the church, it just interrupts the the action in the Batman book for no reason. Like it has nothing to do with that issue. It just
Yeah, it
shows
was
up
like,
and
oh, we're
leaves.
doing like a cult thing too. So like we're gonna do like Hands is like your first act villain, and then this is gonna be the big bad of this Batman story. Oh, or not.
Or
Okay, so it's
no, we're
clearly
not
gonna
doing
be the
that.
Justice League villain. Okay.
Yeah, and he's just kind of like their dark side or something in the background. And what I read is that, and I guess this is brought up somewhere in the Justice League issue, but I didn't see it. Apparently, he's trying to bring forth. So I guess he's not dark side. He'd be more like Desaad or something, because he's trying to bring forth the big scary Justice League villain who is Crisis. So Stan Lee is making Crisis a character now.
hmm
And then the big culmination of everything at the end of the second volume is Crisis with an exclamation
Oh
point.
my god.
So it's not actually Infinite Earths, it's just Crisis. Who,
Mhm.
Dan Schneider, $5 super chat. 60s Stan Lee comics don't have sexy women like 90s or 2000s comics, so they got that
Yes.
wrong. Truly embarrassing on their part.
Yes, and it was really weird seeing Stan Lee write sexual women.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
it
don't
was.
think I've ever seen a 70-year-old man look more like a virgin.
Okay, so this is a point that I meant to make at the start, Austin. We're 50 minutes in. There's a lot of stuff we haven't talked about yet. At some point, we should probably just like really briefly just break down what the actual origins are. We don't have to get into like the nitty gritty of the stories, but just for folks that haven't read this, we can at least bring them up to speed on what these characters, what the origins are. Hot take, real quick. I actually did not hate this Flash outfit.
The wet outfit, sorry?
Hot take. I did not hate this Flash outfit.
Oh, see, that's.
I'm
I
probably
want to say it's
crazy.
my least favorite design, but then I'm like thinking about other designs, and I'm like, the Wonder Woman design's really bad too.
I kind of like the rainbow braid idea.
I like that idea. I don't like how plain white it is, and I don't like that it's the only one that looks like tactical gear. Or
okay.
sorry, tactical gear. She's got like the shoulder stuff. And
Well,
there's
it
like
makes sense though because she's just a teenager like fumbling a costume together, and I kind of like that about it.
But I would think it would look more like a morph suit type thing. Like it would be more like that, I would think.
Yeah, maybe
Well,
so.
and she says that she's gonna paint up her helmet with nail polish, but then it's just white.
Oh, that's true. She never actually does that.
Yeah,
That sounds like you're. See, that's how we know it's Marvel. It's not Marvel method because we're starting from a script and then he draws it differently from what is printed in the book. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly.
But anyway, the big point I wanted to make is that I think it's not that it would make the book like less of a slog, but I think, and again, I was liking it incrementally more as I went along, but I feel like he probably covers a multitude of sins, Austin, if he would just set this in the 60s in the first place. I think it's a big mistake for this to be set present day.
Mm-hmm. No, that's fair. I would be interested, I guess, to see that. Another big thing too.
Well, it's just it might as well be already, and then you just take out the references to things, and you stop having the in like attempted like sexy women and stuff. Because what I'm having a hard time understanding with it, where it's not really gelling with me, is like, is this what it would have been like to Stan Lee, just from his perception? Is it what it would have been like if he published it back in the 60s, or is it him trying to be hip and with it and write a modern comic?
Both.
But he's just that out of touch. I can't decide. I don't have an Alien and Predator reference. Like, just set it in the 60s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that part was just weird. Robert Wild earlier asked where this takes place, and that's one of the big like things with Stan Lee, where it's like, oh, he's been living in LA for like the last like 30 years at this point, so it all takes place in LA instead of New York or like the DC cities.
Okay, but are you in like I'm okay with it being a real city because that is how Stan Lee would have done it. But are you begrudging him that at all? Because my thing is, again, you said it in the 60s. and Stan Lee is gonna just make it whatever city he's in. So like, yeah, he's been in L.A. the last several. Now, I wish he would stop talking about everything needing to be made into a movie, because that makes it even more distracting that he's in L.A. But I don't actually mind them all culminating in L.A.
No, I don't. I'm not begrudging him that. I just think it's funny where it's like, oh, the man's lived in LA for the last 30 years. Of course, it takes place in LA. Um, it was more one of those things.
Because the other big thing that doesn't work, just back to my initial point, Austin. The other thing that doesn't work about it being set present day is, well, it ought to be the 60s. All of his women are secretaries. You know,
Well,
and it's very much that approach to female writing. And there's places where it feels like he's really desperately trying to like catch up to the times and have more, you know, like modern independent women, which I think is another reason maybe I like the Flash issue okay, because I thought he handled that a little bit better with her. But like, really, Wonder Woman just goes to work for some publicist at the end of her. You're like, really? That's what we did? Okay.
The Wonder Woman ending is so.
It looked
weird.
like watching Laura Croft go grovel for a job. Like that.
Yeah, the Wonder Woman ending is so weird because she lands in LA and she's like, well, I guess LA's not a bad place to be. Everybody in LA is wonderful, which is something that no one has ever said. And then she immediately gets a job because her boss wants to have sex with her, and it's not treated as seedy.
No,
It's
at all,
really
because
weird.
she's like, oh, he's attractive. I'll work for that guy. And what was stupid about it from my. Sorry, I'm distracted by going back through these.
Okay.
What was weird about it from his perspective was he spent all day long looking at all these different women for this job, and of course it's a secretary job, so they were only women that came in, even in 2001. Okay, he's looking at all these women, and he didn't pick up, like, he wasn't even gonna hire anybody that day. And then this woman walks in and he's like, oh, she's hot, I'm gonna hire her straight away. And I'm like, you're in LA, you saw no attractive chicks that day? Like, really? We haven't even.
The only questions he has for her are basically, can you read and write? Yes.
Yeah.
And can you touch your elbows behind your back? Like, that's basically all he has to ask her.
Austin, she's not a she's not a specimen. Like, she's not played as being an Amazon looking. What? She's not the most attractive woman there ever was. She's not Amazonian. She's just a girl for like a regular plain Jane kind of. I mean, she's pretty, whatever, but she's like just an average girl from Peru who gets a staff that turns her into a goddess, and she doesn't look like that unless she's a goddess. So why are we acting like she's like the prettiest person he's ever seen?
Though the dictator in Peru was like, you will be forced to marry me.
That's true. My favorite part of that issue is when the dictator in Peru murders her father in front of her and then says, and you're still going to marry me, of course, right? Like, that was amazing.
Oh, Stan.
And he did the same thing in the first issue. That was another place where I would have moved those issues around, because in Batman,
That's true, they are back to back.
They're back to back. I would have done that. In Batman, you've got a evil crime lord guy that's trying to marry a girl that isn't interested in him. Hands with a Z, yeah. His superpower is he's got big ass hands. And then in the second issue, yeah, there were places there that read real sexual innuendo. I'm not gonna lie. And then in the second issue, we've got it with the dictator guy that's going after our would be Wonder Woman. And I don't think it happens again. Where you've got, is there another villain that's after a chick to marry him?
I think it's just those two.
Okay. Well, Austin, I'll help you out. I won't make you do all the synopsis. But let's go back to Batman for a minute and just real quick talk about what the new versions of these characters. We'll say less like full on synopsis and more just dossier. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Nope.
Okay, I want to start with Batman. Can I start with Batman?
Yeah, you can do Batman if you
Okay,
want.
I'm gonna start with Batman. So because I never get to do the synopsis thing. So first of all, I actually with a different premise don't mind the whole like gargoyle look. I'm actually okay with this as the Batsuit, but I want him to
I
be
actually like that design.
I
Yeah,
want him to be supernatural.
yeah.
One of the things
I
that
thought
was
we were gonna go there, and I
one of
was
the things
kind
that
of
was
sad we
yeah,
didn't.
he should have been like a man bat Batman. One of the things that was frustrating about this to me was there were certain restrictions I felt like Stanley put on himself for no reason. Where it's like, or maybe it's these are the things I like about these characters, so that's where I'm starting. Because you hear Stan Lee in interviews all the time talk about how Batman's cool because he doesn't have powers. So his Batman has to not have powers, even though we went with like maybe it's just a writer and an artist not really gelling with their visions, right? Because
Hmm.
I don't think this outfit really for it doesn't even look like an outfit. Like he should just be like Goliath from Gargoyles or something.
Yeah,
I
like that's their Hulk.
I wish that was more of his take. I would have been fine with him kind of moving around powers and like types and stuff with some of these characters. Like let Batman be a creature.
Well, and he does it
Um
with every other character. Why not?
well, kind of sort of. I mean like Green Lantern well, no, you're right about that because
No,
Green
Green
Lantern is
Lantern
more of a
only shoots
mystical
energy
thing.
beams.
Well,
That's all Green Lantern
but I
does.
was also going to say, origin-wise, he's more of a mystical thing in the first place. I was going to say they all stay in their lane for genre, but that's not true with Green Lantern. Flash does sort of because it's still, I mean, it's dumb, but it's still a like pseudoscience way she gets her powers. Looking at that suit, why not have a Flash that has a powered suit that gives her powers instead of actually having superpowers? Like make her kind of like Iron Man or something. Like really mix it up, you know?
But then I would lose the hummingbird thing, and I need the hummingbird thing,
That's
Cap. It's
true.
the only good thing in this book.
Did
That's
you have
not
this
true,
thought?
but
Sorry, we're still jumping around. Did you have this thought? Uh, Green Lantern, and the way we get to Green Lantern's name is not great. It's kind of lame, and there's not a physical lantern. It's like there's really no reason for it to be called Green Lantern. Green Lantern is Swamp Thing.
yes,
I
I
don't
did
know.
have that.
I don't know why we did that, and then we keep calling it the Green. And I'm convinced that that's Stan Lee coming to the same thing Alan Moore did because there's no way he knew about that. Like they both use the Green. I don't think he's adapting the Green. I think he's got his own the Green.
That or Stanley and Alan Moore met up at like a conference or something, and he was like, "I'm making my own Green Lantern. What have you done at DC?" And Alan Moore was like, "I did the Green." And then Stanley was
I
like, "I
remember when
like
I
that."
created the Green. Now to be fair, I'm attributing that to Alan Moore. I'm not a big Swamp Thing guy. I don't know for sure that he invented that. I just always kind of assumed he did.
I because I haven't read the earlier stuff, but I could see that being in the earlier Swamp Thing,
I
but I
don't.
don't know.
I don't actually. I don't want to pretend like I know more than I know.
Yeah, get
Um.
out of here.
So, Stan Lee seems to start with Batman more than any of the others. With he's got to start from the exact literal opposite place from Bruce Wayne. So instead of a rich, posh white boy whose parents get murdered, he's a poor black man that lives in the slums who gets who each of his parents die at different points in his life, and he then builds his wealth later by becoming a wrestler like Spider-Man because of course he does
Well, and can I also say
in like
too?
3 weeks.
Yeah,
It's preposterous, and I don't need a ton of realism from my comics and especially from Stan Lee comics, but that's ridiculous even by Stan Lee Spider-Man standards. I feel like
one.
if
I
it
also
was
gotta
that easy,
say,
why couldn't Peter Parker have done that? He could have solved all of his and his aunt's problems.
mhm. So I also got to say with this, every single character in this all sound like Stan Lee, um, which gets really awkward, I think, in the beginning of the Batman one and through most of the Flash issue and some of the Green Lantern issue. Uh,
Yeah.
The main thing with Batman is at the beginning when they're living in the slums and they're just walking around like, the slums aren't very nice. And I'm like, I just hear Stanley talking. Like,
It's like, yeah, I get that about the slums.
I hate living in the ghetto where it's not very good. It's like, oh, Stan.
Well, and the
I only hear you.
and then he's got that period phonetic writing, which really gets in the way.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it does.
And just screams like, old white guy trying to write a black guy and not really sure what that sounds like. And
yeah, but then also with Batman, I think
I should say trying to write in urban black guy in the slums. I don't mean to suggest that every black person talks the same, but he does if you're Stan Lee, and if you're Stan Lee, every black
because everyone talks the same.
Yeah, I was gonna say every black man talks just like Stan Lee, except phonetically with a lot of hyphens.
But the Batman story, I think, is really awkward because it's one of the places where I don't know if you noticed it on the first reading because it's the first issue about how padded these are. At least I didn't with the wrestling thing, so I was like, okay, now we're in Spider-Man. But as I read along, I went, okay, no, it's because all these are padded. Our Bruce Wayne, there's just Wayne. He's framed and sent to prison, and he's like, I'm gonna get revenge on Hands.
Yeah.
And then he gets out, and he's like, I'm gonna get revenge on Hands. So he puts on a bat suit and becomes a wrestler and a talk show host, and he does like all that Spider-Man origin stuff for like 10 pages, and then he goes and gets revenge.
Yeah,
like, it's just there for padding.
Well, I thought the idea at first was he needs resources to be able to get to the man because he's so powerful and hard to get to. But I'm not actually sure if that's how the reason he was able to get there.
Supposed to be,
because I'm not sure what resources exactly he used, except maybe the fact that he's got a glide suit. Maybe that got him to the guy's penthouse or something. I'm not totally sure.
Yeah, because he like airdrops out of a helicopter, but I think it's
I forgot about that.
Awkward because he's like, this is what I'm gonna do, but then like he goes and he becomes a millionaire through wrestling and whatnot. Like I just don't think it communicates his motivation very well through any of that.
No, that's fair. Although I really think it's only a few weeks. I don't think he has to wait that long before he goes and enacts his revenge.
It's hard to say because he earns a fortune. But I mean, I guess you could do that being a wrestler and a talk show host for like 2 weeks, maybe.
According to this, you can. Yeah, again, not especially believable. I also kept getting reminded of Vengeance of Bane in a Batman origin, because you have a Wayne who gets thrown in prison and then builds himself up real hard like Bane does in Vengeance of Bane, for the sake of going out and enact his vengeance, and then and also he's visited by a bat like Bane is, except it's like an actual literal bat, and that's what inspires him to become Batman.
See, I wasn't thinking Bane. I was just thinking like the bat that bursts through the window in Wayne Manor. We were just doing that, but in prison. But I guess that is also a Bane thing.
It's also a Bane thing. Yeah.
I blocked Bane out of my brain.
And then he, and I adore Vengeance of Bane. But anyway, and I've talked about it a lot, so it comes up really. If I see like a person in prison in a Batman comic, my brain tends to go right to that. But there's a lot of weird similarities here. Again, none of which could have possibly been intentional. And then he meets Yinsen, who is just Yinsen.
Yes, who is just Yinsen.
Who looks exactly like like Yinsen, and he's also an inventor, and he's like his Lucius Fox, and he makes all of his Batman garb and stuff, and then he goes and throws his nemesis off a building. The end. And it's, I feel like, for a second, again, communicating things weird. I feel like for a second we're supposed to think that when he kills Hans, it's an accident, but it's not an accident.
And
And
Hands, yeah.
Yeah, I saw Hans, and
Hans Gruber.
because he, yeah, well, he's at the top of a really tall building, but
Yeah, it's true.
he kicks him off. I mean, there's no other way to look at this, and then he goes, "That's for my parents and for me," and I'm like, "Oh, you just murdered that guy," and then and then he says to the woman that he solved all her problems, by the way.
Yeah,
That
she was supposed to be marrying Hans by force, and then he kills Hans, and she's like, "Hey, you just killed him," and the Batman's like, "Come on, babe, let's
yeah,
go home."
and he's like, yeah, I wonder if they get together. I don't know. And then she's like, oh my god, you just killed him. Like that's terrible. And he's like, you don't understand. And like I think he's the exact opposite of Batman. Like I think he just enacted vengeance and he killed his parents' murderer, and that's who he is now. And you don't get any sense in Justice League that he's that he's hardened by that or conflicted or
Well, they do the
anything.
same thing with Flash, where Flash just like straight up murders somebody, is like, "LOL, I just killed," and then like that's it.
Does that happen?
Yeah, she kills the like big guy. She's like, "Well, I killed him." Because the way he writes Flash is just Deadpool. Like it's just like that, like really annoying, grating comedy, but
I
written by
didn't
Stan
have
Lee.
that. I didn't have that with him.
hmm that was my big like, oh, Stan Lee, you're a 7-year-old man who doesn't know how teenagers or college age people talk.
No, you're
Uh,
right, but I mean, I'm comparing it to the rest of this. Like
mhm.
that's like, but I don't think it's obnoxious like Deadpool. I do think it's kind of like Miss Marvel or a Squirrel Girl or
Yeah, like it's all just kind of like
any of
in those realms.
those.
She talks like way too much,
Yeah, but
and
not as much as Deadpool.
uh,
Not even as much as Gwenpool.
there's a lot of dialogue.
Now, I will say, I mean, at the end of that issue, we do bring back the Dark, and he's talking about Batman, but again, only because we've got to establish this guy. Like, it's kind of weird that he cares about that.
Yeah, because it has nothing really to do with him. He's just like, oh, Batman,
And we keep
the
having to,
wrestler.
yeah, we keep having to. Dan Schneider in the comments was like, "Will somebody please tell Stan Lee that wrestling isn't real?" That was pretty funny. But yeah, like he has to just keep coming back because he's the big bad through all of these. But his plan's not all that interesting. Like once we find out what he's actually doing, it's just a real basic, like, bring in the world destroyer, devourer, whatever, and take over the world. Like he likes power, and he's got a religious cult to get him power, and
He's no Doc Doom.
he kills his followers. Yeah, and I was gonna say I think he is kind of supposed to be the Doom of this because he's the villain that keeps showing up in everybody's books.
hmm Yeah, probably.
Oh, I also want to talk about these sort of backup features real quick.
Yeah, which I was reading all of them like thoroughly until about like the halfway point, and I was like, okay, these kind of are nothing, and then started skimming them.
None of them really
like,
matter. Well, and I think that's also why you thought they were 60 pages because these don't count in the 48.
hmm
So that's part of it. But the one notable thing to mention about these backups, they're not real important. They're not real necessary. They're a lot of them are kind of just like, here's random people on the street like starting to embrace the idea of superheroes in the real world. By the way, this whole premise almost demands to be a little bit more down to earth and real worldy, given that it's a world that already has like superhero comics in it and characters that are freaking out that, oh my god, superheroes like actually exist now in the real world. And I'm like, well, this is as comic book of a world as I've ever read.
hmm
So it doesn't read like superheroes in the real world, but there's places where it kind of wants to be that. Like Flash has that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it probably has it to the degree that like early Marvel does, but like
Oh, that's fair.
but like it's not as up to that par.
But does early Marvel bring up comics? Like, bring up
No,
superheroes
but it's
existed
also
already as an idea?
actually, you know what? A little bit.
Okay. It's
Because you
been
do
a
have
while
stuff
since
you
I've
do
read
have
anything
stuff
from that
like
period.
third issue of Fantastic Four, the way they introduce Namor is like Johnny Storm being like, "Oh, like these comic books I've been reading about Namor, and we just found him." Oh, and there's also an issue where they're reading Hulk at one point, which is really weird.
Yeah. Cedar 6 Super Chat, do you see this Justice League working with Snyder?
Uh, yeah,
I
maybe,
mean, as much as anything. I don't.
I guess.
Yeah,
And
I'm
but
a
Rick,
broken
I
record
mean,
with Snyder. Like he would, you know, the only things that work with Snyder are when he adapts it straight from the thing, and even then he
even
doesn't
then,
like straight adapt. Yeah, and but this isn't real interesting on the page. So,
mhm.
oh, I'm sorry, God. So I we got away from the whole reason a million years ago I brought up that interview with Kevin Smith. I gotta finish that point. I'm glad I mentioned this because I don't did I ever finish talking about that, the whole thing where he's like yeah, because he says to Kevin, no, I never finished that. He says to Kevin Smith, Austin, he goes, well, now DC's gonna have a hard decision to make because now that I have my versions, they're gonna have to decide which ones to make movies out of.
Mhm. Oh
Like
yeah, no, I have heard that.
he actually says that, and he acts sort of tongue in cheek about it, but you can tell there's this underlying hubris of like I really want that to happen.
What would you like? Imagine the chaos that would ensue if this is the version of Batman James Gunn announced for his world.
Yeah, exactly. I No, that's I mean you can't do that. Like you have to, and especially with the ones that haven't ever had movies about them or movies that anybody likes, you know.
Yeah, like
Um,
if this was their Green Lantern.
but imagine Stan Lee saying that in 2002.
Mhm.
Oh, DC's gonna have to decide which. Get out of here with that. You haven't had a Flash movie. You haven't had a Green Lantern movie. Get out of here with that. I was rolling my eyes back then, and I hadn't even read this.
Yeah, but we don't even have a proper Batman movie.
But real quick, what I was gonna, yeah, I mean, as much as I love '89, that's true. So real quick, I gotta mention the one kind of notable thing about the backups is the very bizarre choice of co-writer, because Stan Lee didn't write these himself,
Oh, okay.
and it shows. You can kind of tell that, and it says like story with or plotted with or something, but like dialogue, none of it's Stan Lee, which gets a little bit jarring because like you can tell he didn't write these. His co-writer for all these backups until the very last one, he's Michael Uslan. Why? That is the weirdest choice. Has Michael Uslan ever written comics? I gotta go in and see what else he's ever done. Uslan, for people that don't know, he is the reason basically that Batman '89 happened. He's he's been a producer, had his name on every Batman project since '89 going all the way up. Every animated Batman movie has Michael Uslan's name on it. All the films have his name on it. Like, he's he was like pioneer producer guy who just like and he wasn't even a producer yet. He had like just gotten out of college and he was just pushing Warner's really hard to make a Batman movie. And he started 10 years before that, and in like 79 to 80, and just worked on them and finally that movie got made. And he's been involved with Batman ever since. And any documentary that Warner's makes about Batman, Uslan is in that. You see him interviewed all the time. the hell is he doing here?
Well, Stan Lee had dinner with him, and he was like, "You're gonna make these movies," and then he got him to work on this in the meantime.
That's probably exactly what happened.
That's
So
probably
anyway,
exactly what happened.
I just want to throw that out there that it was really weird seeing it. Unless that's a different Michael Uslan, but I don't think it is. I think that's Michael Uslan. Anyway, okay, real briefly, let's just tell everybody what the rest of these are about. Austin, how do we get to Wonder Woman?
Some lady in Peru finds a magical staff and then picks it up and is given the powers of a god. And then she fights the dictator who becomes Purple Hulk by breaking artifacts and sucking them in. And there's weird setup for Hawkman and Hawkgirl who then never show up.
Yeah,
But
I mean maybe they're in the second book somewhere, but they don't have their own issue.
yeah, possibly.
And
And that's
her,
basically Wonder Woman.
yeah,
She's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go kill the bad guy," and then she does.
nearly
I'm convinced
everybody.
this is the only Wonder Woman comic Patty Jenkins has ever read, is what I'm saying.
Oh, Austin. Okay. Yeah, this was just kind of dull and nothing to me. Like it just kind of read like I didn't really have much of a take. He's really kind of all about the archaeologists in this book.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of kind of treasure hunters. Like I wanted to like the kind of Tomb Raider vibe of this. Like the idea of essentially Lara Croft becomes Wonder Woman was kind of fun, but like there's nothing especially Wonder Woman about it. And I mean, there is kind of that question of, do we even need these characters to be at all the spirit of the original characters, or is it okay to just start with like the name of them and turn it into something else? Because the problem is, it starts to just read like these characters, just the names came in the public domain, and then Stanley got his hands on them, and then he told the story, right? Because this is
Yeah, and I'm
like
fine with that. Like that it's just
it's
that.
Witchblade before it's Wonder Woman. Like the risk you run is you're looking real derivative or ripping off something else that's not even that character. That's the risk that you run.
Mhm. Well, it feels like he just kind of went, well, it's like a Greek mythology thing, so let's move it to a different mythology, one that I haven't worked on.
Yeah.
And that's kind
And
of
that's
the
an
only real
okay
thought that's
idea.
put into it. Yeah, no, I think that's fine.
Like we used a real god from Peru mythology.
And then we just
I looked
Thor
it up because I don't know anything about Peru mythology.
hmm And then we just kind of Thor it, where it's like she clicks her things together and becomes the sun god.
Well, and she literally slams a staff on the ground to transform. That's just Thor.
hmm Yeah, exactly. And that's Wonder Woman. It's very uninspired. It's whatever.
It's kind of uninspired. I didn't feel like it was as dull to read as the first issue. I also felt like as it went along, he got less wordy, which was weird.
I don't know. It depends on the issue. I think at a certain point, I just started to like settle into how these were written,
Maybe
and
so.
I feel like that's part of why I liked it more as it went on.
Yeah.
Because like at the same time, like there's things about the Batman issue that I think are fine. It's just not great as a lame villain.
Yeah, and I just thought he was real generic.
Yes.
It's also hard not to kind of hold this stuff, and I'm not saying this to be apologetic, because I do think a lot of this is sort of uninspired, but it's also hard not to hold it to the standards of the initial great ideas. So it's like if you're gonna reinvent these, it's maybe not fair to say they better be as memorable and as exciting as the original characters. But I mean, I have that a little bit where I'm like, well, if you're gonna call this character Batman and you're also gonna derive some of the just general ideas from that character, like by the end he's rich, he's got gadgets, he's in a bat suit, like make it at the very least make me want to read the next issue.
hmm
You know, I didn't.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't want to read any more of this, but I also don't have the like I found it very easy to divorce this from DC. Like I didn't have the like, oh, well, it's not really a good Batman or whatever. Like my issue is just these weren't really great on their own.
Yeah, I
Which
And
is why I like Superman the best, because I think Superman the most feels like a character that would have existed in comics
yeah,
outside of
I
whatever
guess.
this weird idea is.
But I wanted him to stop reminding me of the originals.
Yeah, no, fair enough.
Like I found it harder to divorce it because of that. Because occasionally there'd be a reference, and I'm like, okay, again, I don't know how to play fair with this. I don't understand what we're doing.
Mhm.
I wanted
Yeah,
it to have
well,
nothing to do with it.
yeah, it was just kind of arbitrary, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I don't know. It didn't take me out as much as it probably should have. It probably would have more if I was liking it, to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Okay. Well, you like Superman more than I did, so talk about that.
Well, um,
Well, you called it your favorite. It's not mine, so by
no,
definition, you
no,
liked it
it's
more than I did.
yeah, but I just mean liked it.
Oh, okay,
Uh,
okay, okay.
Superman is like a cop or something, and then he goes to Earth, fighting his bad guy, and then they fight each other, and that guy's like, what is it? He kidnaps the Chinese president, and then he's gonna kill him, and then Superman has to stop him.
Yeah,
Uh,
what's Superman's motivation here, Austin?
he wants to be the best there is, like Ash Ketchum, but he just can't do it on his home planet because he sucks. And then he goes to
Well,
Earth, and then everyone on Earth sucks more than he does, so he's now the best.
okay. What I meant was Superman's trying to save the world, and in a not very Superman way. Like Superman, like real Superman, just sets a good example and hopes that hearts and minds are changed. This Superman goes, no, we have to. I have to help Earth like solve its environmental problems, become better because he's shocked that we're not closer to like intergalactic space travel, and he goes. I need to get us there, not because I care about these people and I want to see them succeed, but because that's the only way I can get home.
Hmm.
So he has
Yeah.
like real self-serving motivation, and that's okay as a starting place. Like I said earlier, I just wanted to see the eventual culmination of that, which I guess Justice League will start to give you a little bit, but it was a little bit frustrating to me, and this is one of the places where one of the order changed, to see so many kind of stock self-serving archetypes all at like all in a row before you finally get to like a more heroic person in the first place, because Stanley, that was always kind of his approach to certain superheroes was well, if I got superpowers, the first thing I would do is make my own life better, and um it would take something kind of drastic to happen to remind me of my responsibility, especially like Spider-Man with a teenager. But he didn't do that with everybody. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
that's not Captain America. And I think that's the reason that I like Green Lantern more than some of this, was finally we got past that formula of every time somebody got a superpower, the first thing they did was figure out how to, they forget about everybody else, and they just try to make their own lives better. And I was like, he's hammering that point home real hard with this. Like,
Mhm. No, absolutely. But I think for me, like, because it's very different from Superman, and I'm fine with that. Um, Part of it is there are so many of these characters throughout comics history that are like, the not Superman.
yeah,
And I think that was part of it. Was I was like, oh, he's just like another one of them. Like I can see this character existing in a number of books,
yeah.
and it was the only one that leaped out at me as someone that I could see existing outside of this bizarre whatever this book is.
Yeah, that's fair. I don't mind the costume. It's kind of the closest
Yeah, it's
to
fine.
the.
His gloves are weird, but
I also wonder why certain characters we kept. I don't mean to be nitpicky, but I also wonder why certain characters we chose to like keep iconography and accoutrement, and others we got real far away from. And like, I don't know that I need complete consistency with that, but it was a little bit weird that with Green Lantern, for instance, it still has his symbol, but that has nothing to do with the Green Lantern. Like,
mhm.
that was kind of an odd choice. This made a little bit more sense because it's an officer's uniform. he's a cop.
I mean,
I,
it's weird that his
sorry.
symbols are like this small. But
Yeah, it was like, well, it was almost like Superman's too iconic to not have the symbols, but then Batman also is kind of that way.
yeah, but then Batman's also just a giant bat, so it's like you get the idea.
Yeah,
Superman, you don't have that because it's too vague of a concept.
you also get the sense that he's slowly bringing in bat symbols in various ways because when you get to the when you get to Justice League, he's got a bat copter and he's got a giant bat on the bottom of his bat copter, so like it's starting to come in.
When he's got that in his issue, but I don't think you see it from that angle. So maybe it does there too.
Oh, good call. Yeah, because it didn't. It just looked like kind of a regular helicopter, and then you get to Justice League, and it's like, oh no, that's a toy. Like that is a toyetic helicopter. I did like the idea, and this was one of the few things that struck me as like real traditional Stan Lee and kind of more inspired. The idea that on his home planet, he is the weakest there is, and he's got to really prove himself in being a cop. And then he comes to Earth, and all of a sudden, he's the strongest. I like that a lot.
Yeah, and none of the villains are great in this, but I think the villain in this is the closest to what a lot of the kind of crappy first villains in a lot of those early Stan Lee
Yeah.
Marvel comics are. I thought fit it the most, and the whole thing with the Chinese president where he like ties him up with bombs on the clock tower, I thought felt like a plot that could have been in a Stan Lee comic. So this is also the closest to feeling the most authentic to me to what that stuff was back then.
Superman gets a job at the circus again. Set it in the 60s.
We do the Spider-Man thing again.
Stop it.
And doesn't he also go on talk shows?
Yes, he does. Yeah, more than half of the Justice League get famous and get rich and get merchandise based on them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe they all get merchandise based on them. There's this whole thing happening in the we won't talk a lot about this, but there's a whole thing happening in the backups with like rival comic companies trying to figure out who's going to get the rights to these characters to make comics based on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Nothing.
That's one of the only full page spreads you get in this entire thing. And then again, we have Lois Lane.
Yeah, she's his publicist.
Yeah, and she's like a comic relief character. She just shows up to say, "All I care about is my 10%," and then leaves and does that over and over again.
The publicist from George Perez Wonder Woman, which is really strange, but.
So here's a note to everybody. Just word to the wise: never become a member of a church whose reverend is named Dominant Dark with 2 R's.
Yes, agreed.
Don't do that. Okay, so Green Lantern is Swamp Thing.
Yeah, it's Indiana Jones meets Swamp Thing. Meets Captain Atom. Meets
yeah, I didn't even think about Captain Atom. You're totally right about that.
Well, Captain Atom is obviously who Dr. Manhattan's based on, so like those two probably just go hand in hand.
Yeah, that's fair. And you're right, he does just look like Dr. Manhattan with the Green Lantern symbol on him, which is so weird because of who the artist is.
His human persona guy reminded me of Violet.
That's
visually.
So weird. So one of the things I liked about this issue, like I said earlier, I don't mean to repeat myself too much, but is just that it's not so origin-y. Like I could imagine, not that I want this to be a movie, but I could imagine the movie or the graphic novel or something where this is the whole story, where like we see him get his powers and then actually go and be a superhero relatively quickly. Mm-hmm. And the story with the woman that's conflicted about her loyalty is who's like thrown at him by Dark but doesn't really want to hurt him was as compelling as anything in this. Like, I didn't mind that story,
That's probably
and
the closest to like a Stanley like classic love interest.
yeah, that's what I thought. And
Hmm.
it's also tragic the way he might have done that, the way she dies at the end. I think she gets killed. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, she does. No, my main issue is it's weirdly like it cuts off too early. Where like he gets his powers, like yada yada, he's doing his thing, and then just like a giant monster attacks the city, I guess. And then he goes, "Okay, this issue has to end, so I'm gonna go take out the thug guys," and he just does, and then it's over.
Well, it's the exact opposite. I kind of felt that way about the Justice League issue.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of the opposite problem that you were having with the majority of these. That they were real padded. Like,
Hmm. Yeah, this is the only one that's not, but I also don't care enough to see the full thing.
yeah, I mean that's fair.
And
Um,
this monster looks like something that Kirby would have drawn,
it really
like a full
does.
issue.
I like it a lot.
Hmm.
Uh,
He's Red Godzilla.
yeah, I mean, I'm still gonna say Gibbons is, I think, kind of the MVP for this book. So much
Yeah.
so that I kind of wish he had done the Justice League issue.
Hmm.
I mean, Ordway's good, but I think his art would have maybe been more appropriate for pulling the whole team together,
Yeah, I can see that.
especially
I
given that
probably
Watchmen's
agree.
a
I think
team book.
Gibbons is probably the best art of this.
That's what I think.
Hmm.
And I don't know, just it's hard to like describe subjective feelings sometimes. I kind of like this guy. Okay, like I know you didn't really care with the whole Indiana Jones thing, but like, and again, I don't know that I would have if I read this by itself, but just after three, you know, characters in a row that are like, oh, I've got these powers, or I've got the suit or whatever, and like how can I, um, take advantage and get what I want from it. It was kind of nice to have a guy that just wanted to help people. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah. He just never really stood out to me as like a character outside of just guy.
Well, he did to me more than the others. And
Yeah,
then we
fair
already
enough.
talked about how the Flash is a teenage girl whose father is a scientist and and injects her with hummingbird DNA.
Yeah, and oh my God, it's so padded. Like it's we start and it's like the scientist guy is like, okay, uh, evil Shield wants to get me, so we're gonna go live in a cottage for a while, and we're gonna hang out on a boat, and then we're gonna come back, and then he gets shot, and she gets hummingbird powers. Then she's gonna train for a while, and then she's like, "Well, where do they live?" Well, there's only like 10 pages left, so I guess I'll just walk into where they live. It's so I was like, "Oh my God, Stan, wrap it up. You don't have enough story here." And it really felt like one of those 90s to 2000s female superhero movies.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. But the point where I was with this book, it was nice to see something different, I guess. I don't
Well, like
know.
I said, I feel like it kind of like lulls you in.
I
Like
I
where
would, yeah.
you just kind of go like, is it the book getting better, or am I just kind of accepting
am
it?
I
'Cause
just
I'm like,
adjusting to it? Yeah.
yeah.
I People keep bringing up this point, so I'll just mention it real quick. Robert says Golden Age Green Lantern was mystical. The sci-fi element didn't come until Hal Jordan. Um, and yeah, that's fair, but I don't know if Stan Lee knows that.
Yeah, who
And
knows?
again, I'm a broken record, but like, if this is supposed to be what Stan Lee would have done in the '60s, set it in the '60s.
Hmm.
You know, or like what he would have done in creating these characters in the absolute first place.
Well, in that way, we don't have to have every college age character being like, oh my God, like, what about this? Like,
No, my standards were
it was
absolutely in the
insane.
floor after a while,
It
most
happens in
assuredly.
the Green Lantern issue, and it's like smart university people, and they're like, see, now I'm doing it. They go to the professor, and they're like, Professor, where did you get
No,
where did you get this thing that you found? It's like totally tubular. I'm like, Stan, you're like 108 years old. This
No,
isn't how teenagers talk.
Plush DX, I get that Stan Lee started in the golden age. My point is, this should have been set in the 60s or earlier, the way he's writing, and especially if. And also with Green Lantern, I still, just because he worked at the Golden Age doesn't mean he knows whether Green Lantern was mystical in the first place or not. I'm just saying I don't think that's necessarily why he went with a mystical Green Lantern. It might be. I just don't know that. Because I was people were bringing this up because of the point I made real early on that we're in some ways kind of staying in our lane with each of these characters and genre wise, but Green Lantern's the one that deviates. It's not if you're thinking Golden Age. I just don't know if he was. That's my whole.
But
point.
it also, Cap, could be a case where like that was Green Lantern at the beginning, so that's just where his mind goes. Like I remember
Sure,
hearing Jeff Johns talk about because he used to work with for Donner, and Donner would be like, Green Lantern is Alan Scott, like that is Green Lantern.
Okay.
So it might be like that, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. And like Flash is Jay Garrick and.
Yeah.
Bob the Hun had a $5 super chat that I totally missed from a while back, so apologies.
Yeah, and I had it logged in my mind for when we had like a moment, but yeah.
Thanks to people for mentioning that. Who loves the ladies more, Stan Lee, Frank Miller, or Stan Lee? Who is the horniest old man? Stan was probably limited in he could get away with in the 60s. Well, and I meant to mention earlier about his, trying to look more legitimate. Trying to live that high life, and be in all the like high class parties and all that. Like and this is well documented, and people talk about it all the time. Like he wanted to be a Hugh Hefner type.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've never really thought of Frank Miller as being super horny outside of like being really horny for New York.
Yeah. You get that a little bit in things like The Spirit.
Okay, sure.
But I don't know that he has a reputation as much as
like
some other
main
guys
thing
for that.
I think of with Frank Miller being horny is just the way people talk about the city they live in.
They really want to marry the city.
Yeah, exactly. I think Joker and All-Star is straight up like, oh, my city, my love.
Robert says Stan Lee did make Stripperella. Yeah, exactly.
That is true.
Okay, well, we've talked
Just
about all the.
Imagine Bob Kane made Stripperella.
Did you know
with
that
Bill Finger?
Did you know that Bill Finger co-created Green Lantern?
I did.
I found that out today, and I
was like, "Did I know that?" Yes.
I was not aware of that. Well, good for you. But yeah, I somehow I missed that. I never knew that.
Well, it wasn't and, it was with.
Oh.
Bill Finger with created.
Poor Bill Finger. That's not nice. That's hilarious, but that's not nice. God.
But I don't know. Bill Finger was just always hanging out. I guess he was just always with people.
That hurt me inside a little bit when you said that. Do you have any idea? Like, I feel bad. Do you have any idea how much I love that joke?
I don't.
Like, that was such a good joke. I feel the same way about that joke that Frank Miller does about the city.
About the city.
I might marry that joke.
You have pages of monologue about how much you love that joke.
Okay, we've talked about all the origins, and we got a little bit into JLA earlier. I don't really have much to add to that. You've got a weird Doom Patrol, like we talked about earlier, that consists of a female parasite and Blockbuster
and Deathstroke.
And Deathstroke.
Deathstroke. Oh my god!
No, he's not Lady Deathstrike.
It's not Lady Deathstroke. Lady Deathstroke.
And he has an eye patch.
Didn't have the eye patch
because Deathstroke's supposed to have an eye patch. Yeah. And again, did you have what I did with this? Where it's like, well, if you're gonna do some villains like this, why can't all the heroes have their villains? Like, I don't even understand this.
Yeah, well, it made me really want that because the Deathstroke thing is one of the funniest things in this entire series, where he just shows up and he's just a purple man with an eye patch, and he's like, "Anyone I touch dies. That's why they call me Deathstroke."
Yeah, and I guess it's a purple team.
Yes, they all have purple powers. Yeah, that one guy's straight up just like a giant purple people eater.
So yeah, this was a weird. This is when it starts to feel more like an amalgam type thing,
Yes.
where you're turning the page just waiting to see what new bizarre version or mixture of character shows up, and I'm like, again, what are the rules? Like, if you're gonna do that here, why didn't we do that all the way through?
Well, it's really weird
Whether
too
I want that or
because
not, you know?
it's really weird because none of the other issues do that, and then this issue opens up and it's like, here's the Doom Patrol, you got Deathstroke, Parasite, and Blockbuster, and here's Adam Strange, and then it
Yeah,
doesn't come up for the rest of the issue, but you kind of get into a flow where you're like, oh, like we're just gonna start introducing things like it's a universe now, and then they kind of don't.
I'm gonna guess there's a lot more of that in the second half, but Austin will
Possible.
never find out
I won't, yeah,
because he's not gonna read this.
unless it's on Wikipedia.
Senior $60 super chat. Should there be a comic about Joker loves Gotham?
Well, we
If
should
Frank
just finish
Miller
All
draws
Star,
it.
yeah.
Oh yeah, there's that.
It ended with him showing up, talking about how much he loves the city.
He can only have that though if he's got a giant tattoo on his back for no reason.
Exactly. Well, one of the things that I find really funny is I don't know if you know how that book comes to be, Cap, but
Remind me.
so Dan DiDio was going to bring in Carrie Kelly to the main DC universe, and
Oh,
Frank
that's
Miller was like,
right.
"No, don't do that, please." And he was like, "Well, like we need something to sell the books." And Frank Miller was like, "Okay, like I'll give you something. How about that?" And then he was like, "Okay." So that was their trade-off, and then he didn't even finish it. It's wonderful.
It would have been really funny if Dan DiDio came back after that and was like, "Look, you didn't finish the book. Now I get to put Carrie Kelly in the main DC universe.
And then
Here we go."
Frank Miller goes, "No, I finished half the book, so you can only put half of Carrie Kelly in it."
Why is it that when Frank Miller says no, they just don't make the thing, but if Alan Moore says no, they do the button? Like,
Because Frank Miller gave them something like big that they could sell. Where
that's
he was
true.
like the
That's
next
true.
big Frank Miller thing. Like if Alan Moore came back and he was like, "I'll give you Watchmen 2," then they wouldn't do it. But they'd be like, "Yeah, look, Alan Moore's doing things again."
I'll give you a Swamp Thing. It's called The Green.
I'll give you Lost Girls, and they're like, "No, no, 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 take that. That's yours. We don't want that."
Anyway, the team dynamic was a little better than I expected it to be. These guys were okay together. Like this was more readable than a lot of them I thought.
Yeah, like it's very much just, and then they come together. Like it's nothing special story wise, but like it's fine.
That's my review. I mean, it was fun enough.
Yeah, exactly.
The Adam Strange thing didn't really do anything for me.
It's just strange. Like I
don't know why he's Adam Strange. And then the big reveal is he's the brother of Dark. Okay, I wasn't sure what to do with that. I'm trying to decide if Dark is going to turn out to be somebody we know or have a name that we know later.
I kept thinking that his hood was going to come off and you would
I
see
did too.
Someone big. But it didn't happen.
It'll turn out he's just Assad. And then we're
he's
like,
the Joker.
Oh, why do we have to wait?
Joker Lex.
He's Joker with 2 Ks.
Exactly.
I don't know why Todd McFarlane came in to draw him for this one panel. That was kind of odd. It looks like that's a joke, folks. It looks like a Disturbed album cover.
Exactly.
Anyway, we've been at this almost 2 hours. Do you have anything else to say about this book that you really don't want to ever think about again? I can just tell.
No, I'm in the process of control deleting this information.
Well, Austin, I'm sorry that you didn't really enjoy it.
That's okay.
I
You did
also did not really, really like. I enjoyed parts of it. I think more than you did.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
but I'm with you on that question of did we just get kind of like indoctrinated?
Yeah, I feel like that happened at least to a degree.
Is it like at a point you're in this? This is not fair. Apologies to Stan Lee posthumously, but like, is it possible that it's like you're in like a dingy jail cell for a month and it's horrible when you're first there, but after a while you just really get used to it. You're like, no,
This is
I.
life now.
You're like, if I ever get out of here, I'm gonna miss all these cracks on the wall.
Yeah.
Is it like that?
I miss being stabbed. Yeah, I think it's a little like that.
Fair to say, not his best work.
Mhm.
Maybe not
I
his
just
worst work.
no,
I
probably not.
I've read the one shots based on the characters that won each season of Who Wants to Be a Superhero. It's maybe a tad better than those. At least some
Oh
of it
no.
is. But also, it's a lot like those.
hmm Yeah, I kept thinking of that story in the Marvel, the Untold Story book, where they talk about. It's when Stan, I can't remember what his company was called, but it's when he like goes off and he makes his like new company where he's like, okay, I'm not the head of Marvel anymore. I'm gonna make my new thing. I'm gonna build it up from the beginning again. And the book's like, hey, he made this character, this character, and this character, and they were all very clearly stand-ins for Marvel characters he did. Like this character was just Iron Man. I kept thinking about that through this, where it's like,
Well,
okay, they're just all
and
Spider-Man.
again, it's not that surprising. Like this, I think it's important, and I should have said this earlier. To note that like when he's building the Marvel universe, he almost left comics. He's decided to stay in it. This is what he's got to do to pay his bills and to try to become a name now. I and I think he does get into a groove and gets really excited about creating all these things or co-creating all these things he's helping to create, right? And he doesn't have that stimulation, that stake anymore.
That spark, even.
Yeah. Like what's the motivation?
Mhm.
DC asked him to do this thing. He doesn't need the money. He does. It's not gonna necessarily do anything positive or negative for his image. Like,
Spider-Man on the big screen's a year away.
yeah, it's honestly, if you think about it, like he did them a massive favor for even making this.
Mhm.
Like, I don't know why they had to be 48 pages. Like, I don't know why you had to write such long scripts with this, but like he did 12 at 48 pages, and I don't know what they paid him, but like who cares? It's not like he needed the money.
Yeah, what I think, I just kind of look at it and it
To be
makes
fair,
me
he
kind of
got a lot
sad.
richer later when
Yeah.
Spider-Man happened, and he got. I think he like sued and won a lot of money because they weren't giving him enough in royalties and stuff. So I mean, like
Mhm.
to be fair, when I say he didn't need money, I mean he didn't have then what he would have later.
Yeah.
But still, he clearly didn't do this because he was desperate.
hmm No, it just makes me sad because Kirby went to DC and like explodes into these are all these ideas I want to do, and this is what we got with Stan Lee at DC.
Yeah.
Even some of the non-Marvel stuff that Ditko did, there's lots of great work he did outside of that too.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of wonder what more stuff would have been like if he had been inspired with things like the Mobius Silver Surfer book, because I
hmm
consider that thing a masterpiece. Like I love that.
Like Stanley coming in and doing his fourth world original idea.
Yeah,
He should have. That should have been one of them, though, right? As just imagine Stanley created the fourth world mythology. I know we kind of have that with the dark thing, with what you were saying with the dark side
that's a good point. Yeah,
connection, but I mean, it's right there. Like that would have been really funny. But
yeah. I don't. I wonder how he would have even felt about doing that.
yeah, it's very questionable. It makes me
It's a
laugh,
little
but
icky. Yeah. Anyway, well, let me go ahead and announce what we're doing next time. Austin doesn't even know about it. I didn't know about this until I looked it up just now. We've got
Uh-oh.
a TV pilot next time, and then we get to go right back to comics the week after that. Let me just remind everybody, like I said earlier, it'll be a couple of weeks now. I've got to take a real mini hiatus from the channel because of trips and stuff happening in my life the next couple of weeks. This next month is going to be real dodgy for me, and then it'll get... it'll slow down by August, and I'll be able to get back to a regular schedule again. I'm also working real hard on the movie, and I'll have occasional weeks where I need extra nights shooting and stuff. But other than that, we'll be back to a pretty regular schedule. So sorry about the kind of dodgy year this year. But thanks to everybody for being patient with me about that. Anyway, Austin, next time we're doing a pilot for a... And probably the first couple 3 episodes. I think this is a half-hour show, so we might do 3 or 4. But Matthew Bass asked us to talk about the pilot for a comedy called Barry, which is an HBO thing.
I just watched season 1 like a month ago.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah, it's a great show.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, that's what we're doing. So Austin's already prepared for this.
Look at Metamorpho. The guy who's playing him in the new Superman is in that show, and he's great.
Oh, okay, sweet.
Yeah, that's a wonderful show.
How did you watch it? Because that's on Max.
So that was on that Crave service that I had through my phone, and I just lost it like a week ago. So that's kind of annoying.
Oh no.
But yeah, I'm excited for that. That's a great show. I wish I watched all of it. I only watched the first season before my thing expired, but
so
I'm excited to see what you think about it.
What would you suggest? Should we do like maybe 2 or 3 or? We can talk about it later to figure it out, but
yeah, I'm just trying to remember how many episodes it is. I don't know. We'll talk about it.
Oh, Chewbacca's Lover says people compare it to Breaking Bad. That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was one of those big shows that people really loved.
Is it a half-hour comedy or is it longer?
I think it's half an hour, but it's like comedy drama. Like he is an assassin that goes to LA and wants to be an actor, but he's still stuck between both worlds.
Oh, that sounds really interesting.
It is, yeah, it's really cool.
Well, I'm excited to check this out. Cool. I didn't even know what this was 5 minutes ago. Never heard of this. And then Austin's like, I just watched that.
Yeah, when the second you said that, I was like, oh, Barry, yeah.
Well, everybody, thanks a lot for watching. Again, if you're watching live or after the fact, we had a nice crowd tonight, and I appreciate you guys coming out and hanging out with us. Thanks for the super chats, for the support, folks that did that. But appreciate you guys just watching as always. If you would like to make a request for the request, as always, or as lately, just be patient with me because we've been having to skip weeks here and there. I'm trying not to do that as much as possible, but just real busy with the movie and a lot of other things. That's going really well, by the way. We had a great shoot last weekend. We're gonna shoot some cool stuff on Tuesday, so we've been getting it done. We're I don't know, principal photography. We're probably 20% done. Out of what have I done now? 5-6 weeks. I feel good about that. And we're only shooting a day a week. That's pretty good.
You said 20% out of like, and I was like, out of 100?
Yeah, out of 100%. No, I just meant like how long have I been shooting? We're only getting one typically shooting day a week, so I feel pretty good about that. That's not bad.
That's good.
But anyway, if you would like to make a request, just know that we've still got a backlog and that we're going a little slower than normal. But $50 tier, patreon.com/geekvolution. You can request a TV pilot or comics. We ask you to keep it to around 6 issues of length if possible. And this was longer than that because 48 pages a piece. Try to keep it less than that if it's at all possible. But anyway, and then movies as well. And $30 tier, you can do a commentary, and you can even do a rewind commentary at that tier. Appreciate you guys. Thanks a lot for hanging out with us, and we will see you again soon. Austin and I are going to be back tomorrow night for an episode of the Superhero Rewind Commentary Project. We're doing Batman Returns, so and that'll be the last thing we're doing for Batman for Batman, for our Batman month. So come out and hang out with us if you're so inclined for that. And we may have something else this weekend as well. Jason and I are working through X-Men 97, hoping to do a spoiler cast on Saturday. I haven't announced that yet because I got to make sure that I can get through it. But I think that's going to happen Saturday night. And in the meantime, thanks a whole bunch for, and John will be there with us as well. Thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you again real soon. I was Captain Logan, and this was Austin, the Day Ghost.
I was like, oh, okay, yes. Bye, everybody.
No, it's called a dramatic pause. I believe they call that a pregnant pause.
A pregnant pause?
Yeah. Did you know that?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Yeah, I think that's what that's called. I don't know why, because there's not going to be children later, but...
You should at least wait for 9 seconds.
If I'd done that, you would have thought I was having a stroke. All right, later, folks. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.